Today is May the 4th, Star Wars Day, a holiday celebrating all things Star Wars. And it's called that because of the phrase "May the Force be with you" from the Star Wars movies, an iconic phrase that sounds a lot like May the 4th, the date, so May the 4th, you get it. Anyways, for today's Star Wars Day special video, we are checking out a game that is on the classic console called the PlayStation 1. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This is actually a greatest hits game. Let's see if it lives up to that side label on the PS1 with our review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. You will watch this video. It is your destiny.
To watch Happy Beard Games. To give you a little perspective on the basics of the gameplay of The Phantom Menace, this is a 3D action-adventure game following the plot of the movie. So it's a movie game. In this game, you'll not only follow the plot of the movie, but there's also other elements as well, sort of RPG elements. Not things like leveling up or stats, there's none of that. But other RPG elements such as interacting with townspeople, going on sub-quests. Yes, they have sub-quests in this game. And it's not just your basic sub-quests like an action game might give you, or fetch quests, things like that. They're more RPG-like, something you would find in a Dungeons & Dragons game. You have freedom to choose with your character. For example, Qui-Gon Jinn on the Mos Espa levels, you can walk up to a townsfolk, he'll ask you for some help. You can do multiple things freely without the game giving you the options. You can just go attack him with any weapon, you can kill that townsfolk and ignore the quest entirely. If you didn't kill that townsperson, you could accept the quest, go on the quest, and maybe take the quest different ways. It's kind of ambitious. Another thing that Qui-Gon Jinn can do in conversations for subquests that would definitely go against the Jedi Council's rules is using a Jedi mind trick. Using the Force, you can trick a weak-minded person's thoughts to get your advantage. So you can take advantage of people really easily using the Force. It's essentially what it is. You can do things in this game like bribe people. You can get tickets to the pod race much easier. You can go meet with Jabba the Hutt using mind tricks to get yourself there. It's all part of different subquests in the game Phantom Menace, which are quite elaborate and pretty deep, actually. They're not in the game that often, and some levels don't have them at all, but the RPG-style subquests in this game do remind me of Knights of the Old Republic, and this game came out way before Knights of the Old Republic, but it does have that Dungeons & Dragons role-playing style quest feel when you accept and try out these subquests in the game. They don't affect the main plot of the game at most quests, but they can help you along your way to get items, or health, or weapons, or just progress the game and give you more things to do within it. This video game was released in August of 1999, the same year as the Phantom Menace movie was released in theaters. It was published by LucasArts and developed by Big 8 Productions, who also did fellow LucasArts game Herc's Adventures, also on the PlayStation 1. Reading from the back of the game case, we get a brief description of what the game should be about. Turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying systems is in dispute. The greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo with a blockade of deadly battleships. So judging by that description alone, and if you didn't know anything about Star Wars or the Phantom Menace, you might think this is a game about taxes, trade, and war politics. But it's not. And as also stated on the back of the box, you can play in this game as characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, Queen Amidala, and Captain Panaka. Strangely enough, you do not play as Anakin Skywalker, who was one of the main characters in the movie and one of the main characters in the overall Star Wars saga, later becoming Darth Vader. Now admittedly, I am terrible at sticking to schedules. So for this review, we're doing a different type of review. We're not going level after level, looking at different aspects of the main game, and plus that's probably been done before by many different reviewers since 1999. Instead, I'm going to ask 3 big questions about this game. These 3 questions are some of the most important things that I could ask about the game The Phantom Menace. I'm going to try to answer them to the best of my extent of knowledge about this game. Those 3 big questions are: 1. Is there a story difference or differences from the movie? 2. What is the gameplay and control like? 3. Is there scenes or actors' voices from the movie. Aside from things that you might expect from a movie turned into a video game, such as levels being much longer than they are in the movie scenes, or even seeing more of an area than you would see in the movie, the main difference between the story of the movie and the story of the game is very slight. It's not so much a different story as it is an expanded story. They took the story of the Phantom Menace, made that the core of the game's story, and the game's levels follow it level after level. There's 11 levels in the game. The levels in the game have you transitioning from planet to planet, area to area, based upon the scenes in the movie. Not every scene is covered exactly the same way that it's shown in the movie. For example, the pod race scene happens from Qui-Gon's perspective, not from Anakin driving the pod. But then the game expands upon the movie's story, and it does this through things like subquests. What I mean by subquests are shorter, quest-like story elements that happen in between the major events of the story of the movie. You have things like you can encounter a Trade Federation Nemodian on his Trade Federation ship, and you can interrogate him and ask him for questions. These questions can allow you to progress the game maybe easier, or maybe find a secret item, things like that. And while I'm on the subject of items, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are both Jedi Knights, so they have their lightsabers as a weapon by default. They can also use the Force to push back enemies. But throughout the game, even with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn, you can also pick up blasters and thermal detonators and other types of bombs and guns. And that brings us to the second big question: what is the gameplay and control like? Gameplay is an essential part of video games. If you don't have good gameplay at the core, the game's not going to be fun to play overall. Even if it has a great story, like a Star Wars movie story, which the game does have, if the gameplay and control are terrible, then you've got a problem. Now, movies and video games each take different times to develop. So when a movie-based video game is made and then rushed out to release on the same time as the movie, things can turn out wrong. And this dates back all the way to games like E.T. on the Atari 2600, which is a game that was rushed. It could have been a deep, ambitious, and bigger game than most Atari 2600 games, but instead it came out very confusing to many players. It was hard to understand without the instructions, and was very different than what people expected from an Atari game at the time. Now with the Phantom Menace game on the PlayStation, it also feels a little bit rushed. Maybe not quite as E.T. level rushed, but it's got some definite problems. When I first played the game The Phantom Menace, one of the very first things that I noticed that I did not like and bothered me was the camera perspective. And the camera is a fixed perspective over the top of your character's head. But on a 3D graphic game, especially on the PlayStation, you would expect some control over the camera. But the camera is stuck in this awkward position of being too close to the character, to the point where you can't see your surroundings as well as I would like to be able to see them. The camera and camera angle in this game gets especially tricky and cumbersome when you're doing platforming. Yes, there is some platforming in this game. It's not too often, but on each level there is a little bit of platforming, whether it's jumping from block to block, jumping on ledges and hanging and shimmying from one to the other, jumping on ropes and then climbing over obstacles. All these things require good depth perception, and with the camera angle fixed the way it is and zoomed in as close as it is, it can be hard to tell where you can jump, where you can land safely, and sometimes how high you need to jump. While the game's graphics are very low quality for PlayStation games at the time, and things look very pixelated or blurry, especially on characters' faces, those are the least of your worries. The worst thing about this is the camera perspective, at least for me, the camera angle, and the camera itself really got in the way. At least the controls in this game are pretty good. You have an action button for attacking with your lightsaber or shooting a blaster. You have a force button to use your force push ability, the only force ability you'll be using in this game, by the way. You also have a jump button. You can press it twice to do a somersault in the air. And if you're using the original PlayStation controller, you can play the game pretty well with just the D-pad, but I definitely recommend using a DualShock controller for this game. If you're not using a DualShock, you'll also be able to use the shoulder buttons to dodge enemy attacks. If you are using a DualShock controller, you can use the right thumbstick to dodge enemy attacks. While the PlayStation 1 CD-based format is more than capable of full-motion video, including live-action movies such as the film the game is based on, the game does not use scenes from the movie. This was likely because they either did not want to spoil the movie as it was very new at the time of this game's release in 1999, or they might not have had the ability to put scenes from the film into the game, as it was still distributing to theaters around the time of this game's production, and this was before it was on home video. The game does have FMV cutscenes, usually between levels as a transition. These FMVs feature slightly higher quality CG than the in-game graphics and are recreations of scenes from the movie. This is why I'm leaning toward it being a production decision rather than a spoiler decision, because the game already will spoil the story of the movie, and the FMVs are in many cases so close to what is in the movie that they look as if they could be animatics. However, the music from the movie is there. The soundtrack from the game uses the iconic John Williams score for its soundtrack, mostly in the appropriate areas of the game. There is also an included music video of Duel of the Fates, one of the greatest pieces of music in the saga, which does feature scenes from the movie and live-action actors. Similarly to the FMVs, the voice actors in this game have their own versions of lines spoken in the movie. They sound close enough, but you can tell it's not them easily. One reason for this could be that there are lines or things not included in the movie which in the video game are also fully voice acted. So to keep the characters' voices consistent in the entire game, they have a new voice actor playing characters like Qui-Gon Jinn, so he can act out the subquests as well as the main storylines. Things like subquests, interacting with key characters, and buying items in shops are all fully voice acted. And that was it. The 3 big answers to 3 big questions that I had for the game Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace on the PlayStation. At first, I didn't really like the game that much. I felt it was a bad movie-based game, and that it was lacking in a lot of the gameplay that I expected from a Star Wars game. I also started to appreciate the game because of its ambitious use of subquests and RPG elements in this game. Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace on the PlayStation really does offer some freedom that is not typically seen in movie games, especially in those games that follow the plot of the movie they're based on very closely. When I was playing this game back in the day, I actually got in trouble for playing it because of how randomly violent it became when Obi-Wan Kenobi fell into the ventilation shaft fan.
Whoa, nice!
Alright everybody, thanks for watching today's Happy Beard Games review of Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace on the PlayStation.
May the Force be with you. Wait a minute. Alright, who are you? What are you doing in my room?
Hey, you want a longer? This droid says that you are a Sith Lord. I can be the only Sith Lord in this galaxy.
Oh, you think I'm some sort of Sith?
Dude, it's just me, Kevin from Happy Bird Games. Uh-oh.